Good morning, everyone. This hearing of the Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and Related Agencies Appropriations Subcommittee is now called to order. I'd very much like to thank our witnesses for being here today. From OSD, we have Mr. Paul Kramer performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment. Representing each of the services are Lieutenant General Jason Evans, Deputy Chief of Staff, G9 Installations, Vice Admiral Ricky Williamson, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Fleet Readiness and Logistics, Lieutenant General Charles Sharodi, Deputy Commandant Installations and Logistics, and Lieutenant General Warren Berry, Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics, Engineering, and Force Protection. This year, the department has sent over a budget request of $9.85 billion for the military construction and family housing accounts. That's a 20% increase over last year's request. I am encouraged to see DoD taking seriously the need to invest in its infrastructure, which is the foundation of military readiness. In addition to significant increases to most service accounts, the request demonstrates a clear intent to prioritize quality of life projects for our service members and their families. While the request rebounds from a significant decrease last year, it remains lower than fiscal years 2019 and 2020 and still accounts for just over 1% of the total DoD budget. At the same time, the need for recapitalization of existing facilities and new mission infrastructure continues to grow. Our subcommittee hearing last month highlighted the vulnerable state of many of our aging and outdated facilities. Broadly, this request is a step in the right direction, but we need sustained and dedicated investment over more than just 2 years. The request notably does not include funding for overseas contingency operations, shifting those projects which are part of the European Deterrence Initiative into the base budget, which is a more appropriate place for them. This move is long overdue, and I applaud it. I am encouraged by the department's increased focus on energy resilience. Specifically, the Energy Resilience and Conservation Investment Program, or ERSIP, saw a 73% increase over last year's budget. This program, which is a critical resource to improve energy resilience, had been held flat in budget requests for the past decade, relying on congressional increases to address rising demand and more complex and expensive projects. Within this program, there is also a $10 million request for planning and design funds associated with electric vehicle infrastructure upgrades. I have been vocal about the need for the United States to embrace and accelerate electrification, and the department needs to understand its capacity and plan for its requirements at an installation and at a community level. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses about what the funding request for ERSIP will achieve and whether it's meeting the existing need. I am encouraged by the increase for ERSIP, but I would also note that there are 10 projects on the ERSIP unfunded priority list totaling some $162 million, which may not even account for the full need. So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about the need for these additional projects and the ability to execute them in FY22 should additional funding be provided. While this request includes many positive stories, we also continue to see the negative impacts of the previous administration's decision to raid funding from military construction projects for border wall construction. There are 16 projects that were defunded and are included in the fiscal year 2022 request for Congress to appropriate funding to, again, the cost of these projects is $221 million more than the level at which they were originally appropriated. I understand these projects were anticipating some unrelated cost increases prior to the diversion, but we lost 2 years of trying to tackle those challenges because of the decision to pull funding and stop design, and taxpayers are paying for that now. For example, in my home state, the MQ-9 Formal Training Unit operations facilities at Holloman Air Force Base, originally funded 3 years ago, remains in a dilapidated state, and our airmen have been working in unsafe conditions for far too long. General Berry, I appreciated our conversation on the subject yesterday and look forward to working together to find a solution to this in this fiscal year. I would also call attention to the fact the federal government will need to address critical safety concerns and undertake environmental remediation projects that are now necessary because of some of this construction. I understand that the Department of Defense will likely not be the lead agency for this effort, but I will remain engaged on this front. Lastly, I must note my disappointment that the budget documents do not include FYDPs. I understand the delays associated with the presidential transition this year, and that it is not your decision to withhold this information, but these lists are truly critical to our ability to conduct oversight, understand the department's planning, and appropriately resource its military construction needs. I hope you'll bring that message back with you after today. To either General Evans or General Berry, I mentioned in my opening statement that I'm encouraged by the increased requests for ERSIP. However, it's my understanding that the demand for funding still exceeds the request. So, for example, there are microgrid projects ready to go at installations across the country, including at Kirtland Air Force Base and White Sands Missile Range. Could you talk about the interest in ERSIP from installations and the regions, and if there was additional funding, what would the ability to execute be?
Sir, thank you for the question. We're budgeting $104 million this year for ERSIP, which is an increase from last year, and we are also in the out years increasing the use of ERSIP. I can get you those numbers. ERSIP is an important program to us, as well as the other third-party contracts that address climate control and environment. But I can get you the numbers for the out years. We are increasing our use, sir.
So as far as the Air Force, so for resilience, we look at it through several different lenses, through energy, through cyber, infrastructure response when something happens, and of course through climate. From a resilience perspective, I don't have the exact numbers for the ERSIP, unfortunately, for the Air Force. I can certainly take that for the record to get back to you for particular projects that we have in the budget for the 22 request. But as you know, and I think as both you and Senator Bozeman mentioned, the challenges that we have, right, are the many demands on the portfolio. And so the many things that we try to fit into the top line and the obligation authority that we do have in the department can't satisfy all the demands that are there. Right. But it is important to us. We are committed to resilience. We have, as I mentioned in my opening comments, with Tyndall and Offutt, many of the projects there in terms of building those facilities and bases back to what we need, not just what was there before, by incorporating resilience and incorporating all those resilience standards into our design standards moving forward for future MILCON and restoration and modernization is very, very important to us.
Admiral Williamson or General Schiroti, the FY22 ERSIP unfunded requirements list does not include any Navy or Marine Corps projects. Do the 4 Navy and single Marine Corps projects in the budget request reflect the entirety of ERSIP demand in those services?
Sir, FY22 included $109 million for 9 ERSIP projects. Giving an example of those, one is Great Lakes, Illinois, our single training facility, and the other is at in Atsugi. Additionally, one of those projects we took advantage of not only the resilience that my counterparts talked about, but on San Clemente Island, which is very important to our training. We were able to get wind turbines up there, which allowed us to get away from using diesel generators. It's a very important part of our base master plans, and we validate that through our mission assurance program by going out, looking at the infrastructure of the base, ensuring that it can respond to any loss of power, and also that we're producing the most efficient use of the power.
Yeah, General Schiroti, do you want to add to that?
Sure, thank you. So from the Marine Corps perspective, we have, across our installations, we have undertaken an assessment analysis of where we stand with our ability to maintain the resiliency that's needed to operate our core functions. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, some of our installations now are at net zero and are able to generate that utility that's required in order to sustain the functions, and in some cases also sell back utilities. So we find great value across the board. We continue to make those investments, but we're moving at a very deliberate and informed pace through our analysis that's being provided there. You'll see in San Diego, MCRD San Diego, where we are pairing up with commercial utilities provided for a long-term power sustainment independence in that regard. So from the Marine Corps perspective, yes, sir, we're taking max advantage of that. Thank you.
It's been interesting as we've worked through some of these projects in New Mexico, where we have a microgrid project at Kirtland Air Force Base. You know, we start to realize that we've heavily relied on things like diesel generators, which, you know, 1 out of 3 times you try to get them started and they just don't start. And replacing those with on-grid storage has made quite a difference. So look forward to hearing more, and with that, I will recognize our ranking member. I want to ask you, Mr. Kramer, this is the first year that DoD has requested funding for electric vehicle infrastructure planning and design. It's critical that the department commit resources to understand its energy demand needs and electrical grid capacity, and to build out its electric infrastructure where necessary. Could you discuss how the department is approaching electrification at installations, in particular to support both the non-tactical and the tactical vehicle fleet?
Sure, Senator, I would start that, but it goes back to, I didn't want to be accused of a spring butt to the question you asked earlier about ERSIP. And really, the plan starts with our installation energy plans. And so if we have a holistic plan of energy needs on an installation, a subset of that would be the grid, resilience of the grid, electrification of the grid in order to provide electricity to the point of need, regardless of what that point is, electric vehicles, command facilities. And then also what we want to do as part of our installation energy plan is build in efficiency into those facilities so that we could reduce the demand, which then increases the O&M dollars to spread out. And so specifically for electric vehicles and electrification to support and focus on the non-tactical, we're years away from electrification of a tactical vehicle. So non-tactical vehicles on an installation, we really have to look at the point of need and the sufficiency of the grid, so we don't throw our whole electric system off balance. So we really have to then hire some folks that are experts in the field, which quite frankly we don't have that muscle memory within our organizations just yet. We may build that capacity, but right now we're really going to rely on some consultants to come back into an installation and say, all right, so here's what the grid looks like today. Here's kind of the direction we're going to go, and we're going to make sure that it fits into our overall installation energy plan, and then we use the tools in the toolkit in order to address a lot of that, ERSIP being one of those. And I think what you'll find is that while the FYDP for an ERSIP doesn't look that deep today, as we fill out the installation energy plans across the entire Department of Defense, then that one-to-N list does get fairly robust because the need is there to support resilience on our installations. That's what we're really looking for. How do we continue to operate regardless of the events that take place and eliminate those single points of failure that exist today in our grid?
Sorry about that. I follow my own advice here. Is the department integrating electrification requirements into upfront facility design? For example, are you updating the unified facilities criteria to think about these things so that we're not down the road retrofitting expensively? And, a lot of what you talked about in your testimony just now, it's not really rocket science. I've been doing this I built my first electric vehicle in the early 90s, and I've been driving electric for a few years now. And oftentimes, it is cheaper if you plan for it. It's not cheaper if you retrofit. So, for example, if you have a new office building or if you have a new housing and you put in the smallest service panel available when you build that, if you add additional demand, you're going to have to make an expensive upgrade. Whereas if you put a service panel in that has additional slots in it, it's not a big deal. So are you making the shift to thinking about this into the future and planning so you're avoiding, expensive upgrades down the road?
Yes, Senator, we have updated our unified facilities criteria, our version of design codes and our facilities guides that we give out to, or that our design construction agents use to give out to their architect and engineers. So those guide specs and facility criteria codes have been updated. And so what we're not in the habit of doing is retrofitting buildings for retrofit's sake. You know, we're going to go into a facility that has a need for more than just one single item to correct. We'll do that restoration modernization, and we'll put in, you know, all of the latest and greatest at that time of contract. But we've got hundreds of thousands of facilities we've got to get to, and so we're really then you know, focusing on the retrofit as we go down. I'll let my service colleagues add in if they want.
Question specifically, as Mr. Kramer mentioned, as part of our installation development plans and part of our mission assurance reviews of our bases, it's twofold. The UFC standard, as we move to look at resiliency moving forward, and this being part of our master plan, we specifically look at the bases with grids, for example, to ensure that when we build back better, and that is built with two things in mind. One, the efficiency of the base, which is a multiplier for us, and two, allows us resilience. I had the great fortune of being the CEO of Naval Base San Diego, had a great partnership with San Diego Gas and Electric, and obviously huge demand signals in that area. But when you have the partnerships with the local energy providers, it's a tremendous opportunity and leverage for us to learn. So certain times of the year in San Diego, Naval Base San Diego is home to 50 or more ships, huge energy consumption. We come onto ship's power to allow San Diego the same opportunity they allow us to operate. And so through those partnerships, I think it's tremendous learning, and it's also an operational advantage for us.
Great, thank you.